kicked off. So thanks everybody for joining our 11th of March external community call. The last one we did was back in December, so it's been about a quarter again since we last met, and it's great to see a good number of you here, all tuning in to see what we've got to share in the world of ALZ. As a reminder, this meeting is recorded, so if you do not want to be recorded, please do disconnect now. You can catch up with the recording later, but hopefully that's okay for most of you. And a lot of you may have got some emails, and if you want to find out how to stay up to date with what's going on and what the latest things are, we send out some surveys that I know Paul's going to talk about later to these DLs. So if you want to sign up, feel free to scan the QR code or click on the link on the left here. So aka.ms/ALZ/notifications/sign-up. And you can fill out the form and you'll be put on our external mailing list so that we can contact you if we've got anything interesting to share or asking for your inputs on topics like we have done in the past. So a really nice way to stay up to date with us as well. We won't spam you, promise. It's very light and often, and we're very respectful of not sending as many emails as we can. As I was saying just before we got started, there's loads of us here around the team, so please do feel free to pop something in the chat. If you've got a question, you can also use the Q&A function. This is, an external community call, so everybody here is welcome to ask any questions you like and get some time to get those answered, and we'll make sure we go back through the chat afterwards to make sure we've got through everything. So I alluded to this a couple of minutes ago. We have a ton of updates to get through. It's a very busy one today, but we're going to get kicked off with our fairly standard stuff. So a bit of a deeper dive into some of the things to look out for today. We've got some stuff about what's new, so there's lots of new documentation stuff that we're excited to share with you. There's some updates on policy refresh and diagnostic settings policies, which Sasha is going to talk us through. We're going to talk through MMA deprecation and Amber updates, which Ian will take us through later. Paul's going to then take us through some zone redundancy and multi-region updates, some things that we're thinking about changing. And then we've got Zach, who's going to take us through ALZ Bicep, and Matt's going to take us through some ALZ Terraform updates as well. And hopefully we're about on time, but I will probably say that we won't be. But we'll get going. Just a brief reminder for everybody, aka.ms/ALZ/AAC should be a page that you bookmark and share with everybody. This is the one source of truth where we put all of the landing zone accelerators, all of the subscription vending, any of the tooling that we approve of and have worked closely with to make sure is meeting the quality bar that we set in ALZ and works nicely with everything we do inside of ALZ. So this is a great place for you to keep bookmarks and stay up to date with. We're always adding more to this. And also another one to stay up to date with is our public roadmap. So we as a team go through this at least once a month to make sure it's up to date and provide the latest updates on here. So this gives you an idea of what we're working on, perhaps that's maybe behind the scenes and not so visible. So we try and share as much as we can so you can see what we're working on and what we're moving towards. And we generally leave survey links and brief updates in the cards as well, so you can always get a good feel of what's going on there. And also our What's New page, right? So our What's New page is what's actually been released. So we've got some good stuff in here that's always up to date, and it's part of our pull request process so that we ensure that people update it. So it's always fairly up to date within a couple of days of what's been going on in the world of ALZ. Now into some of the good bits about what's been going on and what we're releasing. So we released this a little while ago, and we did mention this back in December, but just a reminder for any of you that didn't make that one. We have added some guidance around how to use AVNM or Azure Virtual Network Manager within the context of Azure landing zones. And just as a bit of an insight to the future on this one, based on the recommendations that we make in this guidance, and thanks Simona and the team for working on this with us, we're also going to now start bringing in the recommendations into the accelerators. So Portal, Bicep, Terraform, we'll start bringing that out over the next couple of months and semesters. So keep an eye out. We're going to be making changes, but like that is something that we're looking now to implement as well. So it's not only guidance, but you'll get some of these good practices baked in as well. Also a hot topic is always multi-region DNS. So again, Simona and Federico have been working on this for a number of months. And we've released some guidance here around how to handle multi-region DNS at scale. There's more to come on this, and Paul will definitely talk about this a little bit later when we talk about multi-region. But there's some good guidance here that we've updated in the private DNS at scale article around multiple regions. This one is an interesting one. So this one is a new CAF document, but it's actually an evolution of an FAQ question that we had in there, which was how do we handle dev, test and prod environments within an Azure landing zones hierarchy? We know this is quite a common one that a lot of customers and partners go through, and lots of debate back and forth around what's the right way to do this. Brandon, who's part of our fast track organisation, worked with us to actually put this into a more formal document and takes you really through the end-to-end story of what all the things to consider and our default recommendation that exists inside of Azure Landing Zone. So if you haven't checked out this page, I highly recommend you do, because it's a great evolution of the FAQ page that we had before. So great work, Brandon, and thanks again for helping us out. Another one that has come out here, and this has actually come from our friends over in the Sovereign Landing Zone team, or the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty team, is how you can handle the Azure Landing Zones architecture if you have conflicting regulatory requirements from different locations. So say you have a control from something in Europe, but you also have a control that you need to meet from a compliance framework based in the US. How could you approach that? How can you think about approaching that? So very similar to our ALZ for ISVs document, but this time focusing on how to handle a more complex architecture around management groups and policies for handling regulatory compliance at different locations. So really nice document. Do go and check that one out as well. More documents, and Brandon strikes again. So Brandon's been busy over the last quarter. This one's all about working with our networking team. So Jeff, one of our PMs who focuses more on the networking stuff, has been working with him on this around how to incorporate zero trust practices into your landing zone by default. So obviously there are varying levels of applicability across the different design areas, but you'll be able to go through this page, which brings it all together and tells you which pillars and which zero trust pillars map to which design areas, and then give you useful recommendations as to where to go next. So again, really great guidance. Do go and check that one out. We've added some IPv6 considerations and recommendations to our planning for IP addressing as well. So Simona has been busy with a lot of the other networking folks as well. So if any of you are thinking about IPv6 or working in those style of environments, we've now added some guidance into ALZ's documentation around the usage of that as well and how that works in Azure. There's more to come. There's lots of great stuff, lots of great updates. So if any of you have heard of the tool EPAC, or Enterprise Policy as Code, from the great folks like Heinrich and Anthony, who are busy behind the scenes maintaining this tooling, we've worked closely with them over the last course of the year, and really, got where we're happy that there's a good story between when to use which one. It's not always default to EPAC, and it's not an always default to the accelerators. It's really a decision you need to go through. This is very much for advanced customers, hence the titling of the document. And it actually talks you through, like, how do I, when should I use this? What should I consider? How do I replace if I'm using something else to manage policy? All of that great content's written in here. So do go and check that one out as well if you've heard of EPAC and are considering it. And to complement EPAC, a tool that we all know and love, and we've had Julian on the call before to present the Azure Governance Visualizer, or as GovViz, as some of you may know. This tool is now available via an accelerator, which a number of people in the team, like Saif and James, helped create with Julian. So it's like an in-the-box solution where you can deploy as GovViz into GitHub or ADO, and it can run on a scheduled cron basis and to deploy to a web app, so you can get that constant view of what's going on. So please do go and give that a check out, and there's a supporting architecture center document as well that talks you through that as well. So if you head to the aka.ms/alz/AAC, you'll find this in the table of contents. So a great document here. And now for our big reveal this month. Daniel, who has come on camera, has taken on the challenge of updating our identity and access management content, and we've now released it. So Dan, over to you. Give us an intro and give us what's going on in this area.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. So what we really wanted to do is take the existing ALZ IAM documentation, which has been around for a while, but really update it with a couple of really important concepts. So one is subscription democratization. So that's been there for a long time. It's one of the ALZ principles, but we really wanted to bring it into the middle of the documentation because identity is so important for that. So we need to make sure that we put boundaries in the right place where they should be around subscriptions. We prevent permissions from bleeding from one into another, because without good identity management, subscription democratization sort of fails as a concept. And the other one is bringing in zero trust principles. So Jack talked about that already as far as networking is concerned. So we want to include it here. You'll see a lot of references to things like least privileged access. We want to make sure that we are sort of doing the bare minimum amount of access control that we can get away with to still let application owners and developers do what they need to do. So there are 4 sections. So we've got the overview. So what we talk about here is just where are their security boundaries. So you need to picture in your head what your landing zone looks like. Where should there be boundaries, and how do you avoid crossing them? So application owners who need to maintain security principles in Azure Active Directory or Entra ID, that's crossing a boundary. So how do we manage that? Within landing zones, that's where we go really deep on least privileged access. So we need to let application owners who need to maintain security principles in Azure Active Directory or Entra ID, that's crossing a boundary. So how do we manage that? Within landing zones, that's where we go really deep on least privileged access. So we need to let application owners manage their workloads without constantly requesting help from the platform team and so on. How do we let them do that? We've got hybrid identity, Entra ID. So when do we need to use Active Directory domain services? When do we not need to? How do we avoid sort of exposing your Active Directory infrastructure to things that are running in the cloud if it's not needed? So, for example, do we actually need to enable VNet peering into your identity VNet if you're not using Active Directory? How do we bring that into subscription vending and so on? We look at things like custom roles, administrative units, and role assignments with conditions to see how we can do that. That's sort of least privileged access. And then finally, we've got application access, which is about how your application components talk to each other. So how does a web app authenticate to a SQL database, for example? Is there a way that we can avoid having credentials in your code? Is there a way that we can use managed identities, workload identities, how your CI/CD pipelines work with that, and so on? So what we want to do there is make sure that we protect against lateral movement, we reduce the amount of damage that's done if a principal is accidentally deleted, and we make your code easier to maintain because you don't have to figure out what accounts already exist and what access they have. Thanks, Jack.
Amazing. No, thank you, Dan. Like, some amazing work here, and I think we both agree it was a bit of a mountain to climb over in the end. There was a lot of stuff that we updated and getting it over the hill. But please do go and check this out. I think a lot of feedback we heard from our customers was that this could do with a bit of a refresh, and Daniel put his hand up, and we've got some amazing content out the back of it, and there's some more coming in this space as well, so do stay tuned. We've got some more documentation to add around the identity space, being that it's so critical. So yeah, amazing work. Thanks again.
The one thing it's taught me is the amount of effort that goes into writing our documentation. It's huge.
Yeah, when did you start doing this, Dan? Sort of November?
It was some months ago, yes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of effort that goes into this behind the scenes. So yeah, I think that's good to call out. So a great feature that we have also released this month, or just actually a couple of weeks last week, is a feature to the Azure Landing Zone portal experience. So for any of you that are using that with some of the customers who are maybe not as mature and wanting to use infrastructure as code like Bicep or Terraform, but do want to get all the benefits of Azure Landing Zone still and get started on the right foot, you can use this new feature, which is at the end of the portal experience. So it's one of the last blades. And it now uses Azure Resource Graph to query what available policy initiatives are available for regulatory compliance within the tenant you're in, and then gives you a list of the ones that are available and lets you choose where you want to assign them in your various management group hierarchy. So as you can see here from the screenshot in the bottom right hand corner, you can see you get the choice of which policy you want to assign where. And for some policies, there are some required inputs. So for those ones, you will be prompted with the various inputs that you need to require, as well as examples via the tooltips on how to do that. And there's a nice blog post that has gone out and supported this one as well. So please do go and check this one out if you're using the portal experience or you're doing those POCs with customers. It's a really good way to demo the value of Azure landing zones. And for those of you who are Bicep or Terraform customers, you can already assign these policies anyway. They're just, you need to know the built-in policy initiative ID, and then you can go and make an assignment for that just fine. So you're not missing out on anything. That's all possible from those accelerators today as it is. And with that, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to hand over to Sasha to talk us through some policy refresh bits and pieces. So Sasha, over to you, sir.
Here we go, just fighting with technology again. Good day, everyone. We've got a couple of updates, not very heavy this time around, and I think that this coming refresh is also going to be fairly light, but the next one is going to be quite intense. So I'll be real quick about it. We're busy working with the product group around some backup initiatives, particularly around ransomware protection and malicious actors potentially deleting backups and recovery vaults and things like that. So there are new policies coming out. We were going to release this with the previous refresh. I don't think we're quite there yet. We're still waiting for PG to land a couple of new policies around multi-user authentication and being able to audit against those things. So that's coming. We have released new resilience initiatives, right? And this is specifically for those services that are currently supported and have built-in policies to validate that those services are deployed using proper zone resiliency, so across availability zones where possible. So there are some configurable options, and obviously it depends on the nature of the service, but it's really handy, especially if you're having resiliency conversations with customers being impacted by outages and things like that. So good focus, definitely have a look at the initiative. It's high value. Another thing that we're also doing as part of that initiative is also rolling out, we've included a policy, a default assignment as well, to ensure that resources and resource groups are in the same location. It seems like such an obvious thing, and amazingly, this is not, this gets violated all the time. And the issue is if a region fails and you've got resources for multiple regions in the same resource group, all the other resources will also fail because the metadata is stored in the region that failed, right? So it is really important to separate those out and make sure that the resource group contains all the resources for a specific region. So these are all now default assigned and available to be used. Diagnostic settings, well, there's really a lot of requests for improvement on diagnostic settings in ALZ. I would say probably about 20% of the GitHub issues is on this topic. And really, we just wanted to let you know that there is really a large change coming imminently. It was promised to happen in January. It's now March. It will land really soon. But essentially, we're getting about 420 new policies and 6 initiatives, right? They'll cover all 137 services that are available today. And there's 3 sets of these policies. So depending on the target that you want your logs to go to, so log analytics, event hubs, or storage accounts, and with their associated initiatives. And the key distinction here is that not like how we've done historically in our custom policies, we're now doing category-based logging, right? So it's either all logs or audit logs, right? Audit logs only, right? So and those are the categories for the services that support it. Not all of them do yet. So the default will be all logs for those services, like Azure Firewall currently doesn't have an audit log category. It only has all logs. But that will evolve over time. But the key is we'll provide diagnostic setting policies and initiatives. So it'll be much easier. We'll have one initiative assignment, much easier to manage, one target, way better. And obviously it makes our lives easier as the ALZ team because we're no longer having to manage these custom policies. They will, of course, continue to exist, but they will be deprecated, just so that you are aware of this coming. And this should they're in the published queue, right? And this can take a couple of weeks. So it is imminent, and as soon as they land, we'll prioritize getting these integrated into ALZ and all the reference implementations. And that's it for me. So I'm going to send it back to, Arjen, go for it, buddy.
Thank you, Sasha. We're going to talk about two topics today. You're going to have me for both the MMA deprecation update and some EMBA updates. Let's first get started here. We're working very hard behind the scenes to really get MMA out of Azure landing zones, really change up to the new AMA agent. And we kind of have to, right? Because we have to August to really get all of this work done. And we're working very hard behind the scenes with different product teams inside Microsoft to really, build up all the things that we need. I'm happy to say, though, that the portal reference implementation that we can do is now already using AMA. So if you do a new greenfield deployment from the portal experience, that will only use the AMA. So you will see that there's some additional resources that are being deployed with that. So you'll see that we're now using user assigned managed identity specifically for the AMA agent. I will go into that a bit more detail in a moment on that. But you also new resources like data collection rules that didn't exist before, right? So the AMA agent really depends on those data collection rules to help you gather that information and store that information. There are 3 currently that are being deployed for VM Insights, change tracking, and also for the Defender for SQL. You will see that there are data collection rules. Right? Along with this, there are also some new policies. We try to use as much as the built-in policies as possible. So you see that all the change tracking, as well as the VM Insights and the Azure Update Manager policies are all built in. The only custom policy that we currently have is for Defender for SQL, but we are working very hard to get those policies implemented as well as built-in policies. Now, all of this, right? This has been a long, ongoing project. Multiple solutions use the MMA agent. All of them now have to switch to the AMA agent or adopt other processes. You see some going for agentless. There are still some parity gaps or some things that are not quite the same as what they were with the AMA agent. We've combined all of those. Again, we're working internally with the different teams to get those sorted. If you want to see a list of the things that we have identified, where still some parity statements, go to the link that's on the screen. We'll keep that updated throughout this process. Right? Because like I said, we were working with the different teams to get that sorted. And it's also one of the things that we're working on currently, right? One, the portal experience, that's nice. That's all implemented with AMA. We're still looking to do the same for Bicep and Terraform. That is coming. So we'll see that in the upcoming months that also Bicep and Terraform will start using the AMA agent. There are a few principal things that we need to cover for that, right? And one item that we're working on right now, right, the high priority item that we're working on is really how we're going to deal with the user assigned managed identity, right? The AMA agent uses that to authenticate, right? So we are in some design discussions to make sure that we can select the best way forward there in terms of scaling. Right. So if we deploy it to 5,000 subscriptions, that can scale to that level, and also that we keep a centralized approach to that, so that we're not overloading, the entire environment with 5,000 or more new identities. So that's one of the key items that we're working on. That in turn will impact some of the policy changes that we need to work with the internal teams, right? So currently, policies use, one identity per subscription. So that's something that we're defining and aligning to make sure that we get the best scaling capability and best centralization. So there's the key things that really define our way forward. There's also key things that are needed for us to move forward with Bicep and Terraform, as well as for our brownfield guidance, right? AMA for the portal, that's all great for new customers, but we'll make sure that we have that guidance updated as well for everyone here to adopt the AMA agent in their environments. So that policy and those guidance for brownfield customers are also coming. Now let's switch gears for a moment. Let's go into some other updates regarding the Azure Monitor baseline alerts. We've been working with the team, and I must say, Bruno, Alex, you guys did amazing work with the entire action group updates. Before, we used to have an action group that allowed for notifications to email addresses. That was really the first implementation that we had of that, and we really expanded that, and did an amazing job, including things like sending email address to ARM roles, to Azure Functions, notifications to Event Hub, logic apps. So you have a wide variety of actions that you can now use inside that action group. Along with that, we also did some changes in the way those notifications were sent. There were some dependencies before where we had the alert processing rule inside the service health initiative, and it created some dependencies between those. So to deal with that, there's a new initiative, notification assets, and basically all of the initiatives, like if you look at the networking alerts and things like that, we'll use that new initiative for the alerts that are being generated. There are numerous documentation updates, everything that you can find. If you go click on the link on top right of the screen, there's a what's new. You can see all of the different updates that we have there. I think one of the last key points that we have to talk about here is the existence condition, right? Once you deploy something, an alert to Azure, there was a lot of flexibility there in which you could basically go into an alert and change the threshold and change a lot of things. And we built in some tooling, some existence conditions there that checks and audits and helps you remediate those alerts as well, if for some reason the thresholds have been changed. You see there we have some static and some dynamic values there. Basically, those are the things that we've added to that existence condition just to make sure that you can stay compliant to actually the thresholds that you've indicated that you're actually monitoring for those thresholds. Right. There are some things that are still coming. So the things that I mentioned earlier, like the action groups and things like that, they are available in the Emma repo. And we're currently working on bringing those to the portal experience as well. So we need to make some small updates to the portal experience, expose some more parameters, so you can actually, let us know where you want or what your function app is or what your logic app is, right? So those things are coming to the portal experience. In the background as well, there's still Emba in the pipeline for Bicep and Terraform. There's also an alert processing rule coming to deal with suppression of alerts. So you can imagine a scenario where you need to do some maintenance. We will create a suppression rule that will allow you to do that. So you can use that rule to say, like, hey, these VMs or these resources will go into maintenance. I don't want to receive any notifications for those resources. And as well, we think of a scenario where you may already have an action group or something deployed yourself. So we want to give you the possibility as well to get to use your own action group and not be dependent only on the one that we deploy. Right. There's a session coming up, and the link is there. So if you're interested, which is preparing for the unexpected, and in that session, we're going to dive a bit deeper in the server's health alerts and how you can deploy them and how they work. So if you're interested in that, click on that link that you see there, aka.ms-readiness/videos, where you can sign up for that event. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Some great updates you've been doing there. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to take you through a couple of slides on zone redundancy and multi-region work. So firstly, starting with zone redundancy. So I just want to call out the objective of what we're trying to achieve here and why we're focusing on this. And this is a high priority for us, alongside the AMBER and the AMA agent or the MMA deprecation. This is also very high on our radar as well. And the objective is to make all Azure landing zone redundant by default. So what do we mean by that? We mean that our portal, our Bicep, and our Terraform are all from the get-go able to have a default, a zone redundant configuration. So we did a survey recently, and 154 of you responded. Thank you. It was a very quick and snappy survey. It was just one question. We put some slides in there as pictures, and it was kind of, we were asking you for kind of your guidance as should we have a switch, shouldn't we have a switch? But you know, your feedback was really well received. Thank you for contributing to that. What that fed into is how we're going to approach this, and some further alignment we've had with the product group, and how our product group teams also kind of deprecate, or make breaking changes, which this would be. So we need to be careful, because obviously, if you look at Portal is kind of more of a greenfield, one-time click and deploy. Where obviously, when we look at Bicep and Terraform, that's kind of, you know, continuous deployments. So we have to kind of really consider how the impact for brownfield, and that doesn't just go for this. This goes for everything, like the AMA and the Amber and everything that we do in Azure Landing Zone. We always need to make sure we're looking after our existing customers and taking you on that journey as well. So the phased approach is phase one. We're doing Portal, Bicep, and Terraform accelerators. So the Bicep and Terraform accelerators, don't be confused with the modules, which I'll touch on phase two. So we're striving to get these updated by the end of Microsoft's fiscal year, which is kind of June in calendar terms. That's kind of the second quarter of calendar year 24. Now, the phase two will be where we're looking for Bicep and Terraform modules to be zone redundant by default. Now, we're going to be planning to do that towards the end of this year. What we're going to do, we're going to start to release a series of communication. So we're going to be blogging on that communication and those plans and timescales in the weeks ahead. So in the next month, I would hope we'd have a blog out for you. Haven't quite decided whether I'm going to combine that with multi-region yet, or I do separate blogs, but we're going to post this out to you to give you more information on this so that you can help plan. To be clear, what we ended up landing on was that when we do go with phase two, the Bicep and Terraform modules, they will be updated without a switch, and it will be a new major version because it's a breaking change. And then we'll make sure all our guidance is updated to help you in readiness for that. So we will over communicate this on every call. Jack will be doing this at the beginning of every call, or I will with Jack, telling you about this. It's coming, get ready. We'll be doing it on LinkedIn. We'll be doing it on blog posts, because this is going to be a big change. And this is how our product groups, sister teams work as well in releasing those breaking changes. So we're following the same consistent approach as those teams as well. And just to show you as well, Portal is already complete. So in our phase one, we have updated our Portal. You will see, you may see on the boxes, if you can see the pictures, we've got zone redundant by default as a recommended. One of the things we've also done as well is we've also put some text in the pages for you as well, just to say, hey, the setup we've got here is for a production environment. If you're not running a production environment, you may want to turn off these zone redundancies, because there will be some additional cost incurred for having zone redundant as your ingress and egress is moving across the regions as you start to roll out workloads within. So we just want to make sure we give you as much notification as we can. But the mandate and the driver is we need to make Azure Landing Zone redundant so that we can minimize any impact to you as partners and customers in future deployments, so that that anything that does happen, hopefully you have a minimal experience of degradation of services on there. All right, okay, so just moving on, switching gears a little bit, but very similar theme. So where we talk about zone redundant by default, this is within a region. Now we're spreading out and looking at multi-region. So how do we go from one region to multiple regions, or how do you start with multiple regions by the get-go? So for this one, we did another survey, and sorry if you're getting survey overload from us, but we genuinely really appreciate your feedback, and I wanted to share a couple of the tag clouds from this as I've kind of put some notes in here. So we had 56 responses. It was a detailed survey. Thank you for those who took the time on that. As I say, it's really valuable input. And you can see some of the things that are kind of coming out on the screen here. So networking, gateways, VPN, very networking heavy. Not a surprise to us, but we need to validate our thinking, right? We don't want to, we don't want to work within a silo. We want to hear from you and make sure that what we believe is the right thing to do is what you need us to do as well. And your feedback we heard loud and clear to help us align and address those. So, many thanks for that. I want to call out as well that the majority of respondents have 2 region deployments as well. So that was the kind of the most common pattern that we were seeing. And what we're going to do with the portal deployment, we're going to limit to two deployments in the portal. So we're going to have 2 regions as a maximum. And the reason we feel that limit is there is we want, if you're going to go for 2+ regions, we really want to be encouraging. We do anyway want to encourage you down that infrastructure as code route so that you can continue to maintain as you move forward. Because if you start to roll out 3 through the portal without that kind of infrastructure as code handle, that could become more challenging for you. So there are some design decisions and considerations we've taken there as to why we're going to put those limits in there for you from a portal deployment. And also just a kind of an interesting fact, and I'm sure Matt White will be pleased to see, is he's winning the race on the deployments that Terraform led the way with. More than half of those who are using or wanting multi-region are doing so with ALZ Terraform. So again, thank you for sharing your insights with us on that. All right, okay, so where are we going from here? So again, the survey was kind of back end of last year, lots to go through. We have processed all that information. What we've done, we've also gone through our design areas in CAF, and we've looked at what do we need to update, and how does that look from a documentation perspective, and how does that look from our reference implementations as well. So we've locked in focus areas. You've heard Brandon, who's done some awesome work that Jack was demonstrating and showing you some documentation earlier. Brandon is helping partner with us from the Fast Track team on this, and he's bringing in some of his very talented colleagues to help build out this, as well as working with us to do this as well. So various things in there: privacy DNS zones, VPN gateways, having these multi-region to kind of expand and enhance that resiliency journey for you. We've kicked off the work on the portal reference implementation to include these changes. It won't necessarily be finished by the end of this month, but we're starting, so we're getting our teeth into this, and that kind of looks at all of the scenarios above and how do they fit. So it's not just a case of going to a second region and deploying a second V1 hub. It's about how do they then interact? What do we do? Where do we kind of draw the line as to what we do through an automated process, and what do we then talk about as documentation follow-on to kind of meet that 80-20 rule, so that we don't niche this too far, that it's kind of not for the masses here. So that's where we'll get into that finer detail as we really get involved in that reference implementation. And then typically what happens is, once we've done that in the portal, the Bicep and Terraform reference implementations will follow. All the learnings that we've taken about how we glue all this together will then flow into those reference implementations. Now, planning, we have a lot going on, as you've heard, but we would hope to get this all wrapped up by the end of the Q3 of this calendar year. So we have all of those multi-region aware. Now, we're looking at things for Bicep and Terraform, like changing the code snippets by default and having some rollbacks for you if you didn't want to go multi-region and those kind of things. So we're working through those finer details as we go through the sprints on that. All right, I'm going to move. I think I've finished on my slides now, and I'm going to hand over to Zach. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. And
Zach, there's a question. I saw someone's hand go up. I'm not sure if that was just a wrong button press, but I'm happy to take a quick question, or
oh, sure. Looks like
you can do it on chat. Yeah. All right, no problem. I'll let you go, Zach.
Cool. Thanks. All right, so just going to jump right into it here. We're going to have a few updates essentially just to go over, and then as well we'll kind of jump into the roadmap for what we expect in the next few months. If we want to go on to the next slide, please. Is it stuck on this slide? Oh, there it goes. Okay, sweet. All right, so for those of you who weren't aware, just last week we released version 17.2. So a pretty small release, but within the last quarter or so, we've had the following updates. So starting with the first one here, we have introduced resource locks at all ALZ Bicep modules. So along with being able to configure resource locks at each individual resource within the module, you can also set a global parameter that will essentially enable resource locks for the entire module itself. So that was a big change, and thanks, Robert, for that awesome enhancement. We've also added policy assignments for baseline sovereign landing zone initiatives. So 2 separate initiatives at 3 different scopes. And so these ones are more along the lines of restricting particular deployments at regions, as well as limiting which virtual machine SKUs can be deployed within your landing zone, as well as a few other things. So that was a pretty big policy assignment that we added. And then the third one here on the list is that we have added parameter files and associated wiki document kind of outlining which particular resources are impacted from a zone redundant configuration standpoint. And then so those parameter files also have the ALZ zones configured as well so not a mandatory thing, but just something if you want to take a look at for what to expect as we do get towards configuring some of those default values within the modules in the future. And then the fourth one here is that we have implemented new deployment toggles within the hub-spoke networking module. So with this, previously you had to essentially, if you didn't want to deploy the VPN or the express route gateways, you had to basically remove your configuration within the parameter object. But now there's a couple of Boolean values where you can kind of toggle those, so you don't have to wipe your configuration, which is a pretty nice enhancement and something we've had requests from multiple customers about. And then lastly, we have added support for new Azure regions. So for the modules that are associated to that specific requirement, as well as updating the actual ALZ Bicep accelerator. And that's about it for the updates. We can go on into the next slide, which is going to be covering just some of the things that will be coming down in the roadmap. So for those of you who aren't aware, in that top right link there, we have recently just published a public roadmap for all ALZ Bicep enhancements. So please take a look at that if you have not already seen that. For some core features that are coming down the line, one is being that we're going to kind of get in line with the portal deployment model. So we're going to be working on integrating Azure Monitor baseline alerts, and then obviously getting the associated documentation in play as well. For the second one, we're going to be working on making sure that we can accommodate MMA deprecation with AMA. So again, getting aligned with what the portal deployment already has incorporated. The third thing in the roadmap here is something that Jared Holgate is working on, and this one's going to be working on automating the setup of Azure DevOps and GitHub within the accelerator. So this is going to be more for net new customers or greenfield-based customers, where we're kind of taking out the manual steps that we previously had. So that would be something where we're going to be looking forward to pretty heavily. And then the fourth one on the list here, so we want to basically add the ability to customize subnets and then add additional conditions within the hub-spoke module. This will likely expand within the VWAN module as well, but just a call out for that. And then lastly, we've had some customers kind of bring up concerns around how to kind of stay up to date and how to add customizations within the accelerator framework, specifically for the policies. So that's something that's going to be kind of coming out down the road. So keep your eyes on that for just kind of basically making it easier from a day-to-day perspective on how to handle policy updates within that framework. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well. So thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks. Over to me. I'm going to take control of the slides. That's all right. And now I've got them. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the updates we've been making and the progress we've been making towards V1 of Terraform vNext. So Jared was on this last time, I think, and did a great job of demoing kind of where we were and what software was like at that stage. We've had a spurt of activity in the last month or so, but just to recap, the ALZ Terraform vNext approach is to be more modular. So the main focus of that is on the pattern module, which deploys management groups and policies and role assignments, and we've got examples of those linked there. Now, some of the changes we've been making are to separate out the core networking stuff into its own modules, as you can see there. So the idea is it's a bit more like a candy store where you can say, oh, well, I want a way of deploying managed groups policies. I want a way of deploying core networking, whether that be hub and spoke or vWAN. And then I want to maybe layer on top express route gateways if you're in a hub and spoke network and things like that. So these are all separate modules. That's in response to feedback that we've had over the years, essentially, and also the maintenance challenges that we have with the current module, which is getting extremely large. Most of these modules now are Azure verified modules already. The hub and spoke network is in progress. We just have to refactor some of it because it currently uses a sub-module that isn't AVM, so we need to do a bit of refactoring work there, but it's coming. I wanted to just talk about a little bit about the pathway towards V1 and what we're doing with that, what we have planned. One of the biggest changes we're making from the early builds of this is to decouple the data from the logic. Now, we had originally baked in the library into a Go module that was used by the provider, which meant every time we update the policies, we needed to re-release a new version of that module, then rebuild the provider, re-release a new version. And the provider logic and the brains, the ALZ library logic was tightly coupled with that data and didn't really make sense. So a bit of exploratory work later, and we have completely decoupled the policies to the provider. So now, just like you can in Terraform, say, I want to use this Terraform module and I want to use this version of it, and then it'll go off and download it for you. Exactly the same with policy. So you can say, look, I want the ALZ policies and I want this version of them. And the provider behind the scenes will go and download them for you. Now, it uses exactly the same method as the provider does, as Terraform does to download modules and providers, right? So it uses a library called GoGetter, which is fantastic. And it just allows us to basically go and get stuff from everywhere. So that with that decoupled, hopefully that'll give you a lot more flexibility in terms of whether or not you want to use the ALZ library in the first place. You can not. You can use your own copy of it, and that can be on GitHub or in an Amazon S3 bucket or kind of anywhere else that the GoGetter library can read from. You can also use local file system as well. So for those situations where your customers don't have access to just download anything from the internet, then we also support local file systems too, just like we did before. So that's that decoupling. I'll show you that in a minute. The next thing is we've tried to minimize the number of ways of doing the same task. So before you could customize your archetypes, and you could do that in the Terraform code itself in the HCL, but you could also do that in using the library. So we actually said, no, look, we're just going to use the library to do this. We've got this concept of override archetypes, which is where you say, oh, look, I like your root archetype, but I want to add these 3 policy assignments to it or whatever. So we've got that capability now built in. We've also got policy assignment modifications in HCL now only. So before we allowed you to add them, but now we only allow you to modify the ones that are there. The idea being that, again, we just want one way to do one thing because it's easier for everyone to manage. So we've got that, and I'll show you that in a second. The last piece of the puzzle is to separate out something we're calling well-known policy assignment parameters into the library as well. So if you think about diagnostic settings policies, right, you've got the input to that, which is typically a log analytics workspace. Now, you might have that value being passed into, half a dozen policy assignments. And the library should be able to say, look, the default value of default log analytics workspace now belongs in these particular inputs to these particular policy assignments, really simplifying policy management at scale for you, the consumer. So that's not implemented yet, but it will be. Currently, that's still baked into the Go code, which again is quite difficult for us to manage going forward. So yes, you can use it now. We'd love you to use it. We are getting some feedback already, which is fantastic. We do recognize that at the moment the documentation is light That's kind of deliberate because we know we're going to be making breaking changes, so we don't want to write loads and loads of documentation and then have to change it all. But yeah, so what I'm going to do now is spotlight me, and hopefully, if someone could let me know if I am spotlighted and you can see me over the presentation. I've done it, so is that working?
You look the same size on my side.
Ah, okay. Well, let's stop sharing.
Stop sharing, Matt,
Yeah,
and then spotlight again.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's big.
Okay. So there you go. So here I am. So this is the Azure Landing Zones library. So this is a separate GitHub repo, which we hope will become the source for all policy artifacts and kind of landing zone, platform landing zones architectures going forward. For now, it's just used by Terraform. But you might recognize there's a ALZ directory in here, and this looks kind of similar to what we have today in terms of the archetype definitions, policy assignments, things like that. So we're keeping these in a GitHub repo, and we can see we've got a release. Now, we're doing the releases like some other repos do with shared code in. So it's the name of the part of the repo, then a slash, then a version number. So we've got platform/ALZ/2024.03.00, right? So that tells you that you can check out that version of the ALZ platform library with that tag. That's how we're doing that. How that kind of looks is if we go back to the new provider documentation. So you can see in the provider declaration, you've got this thing called ALZ lib reference. So again, this is that tag we saw earlier. So the provider will have a default baked into it, but you can override it. So yes, when you upgrade your provider, it will default to the latest policies, but it's really, really easy if you say, no, look, I want the old one still. I don't want to upgrade my policies. I just want the new provider because there might be a bug fix in there I want, or a new feature that I want. Also, you can specify lib URLs. This used to be called lib directories. Now it's called lib URLs. And the reason is you can specify local paths, but you can also specify like HTTP URLs and things like that for where you keep your policies. So you are able to build these up in a layered fashion, and it processes these in order. So always processes the ALZ one first, if that exists, if you haven't disabled it, and then it will process all of these in order, so you can overwrite them. So yeah, that's one of the big changes, and you can see that we've got a reference to the Azure Landing Zones library in there now as well, and kind of what resources that they contain. If you're interested, ALZ lib is the brains behind the provider. So the provider obviously is in its own GitHub repository, which you can normally look at if you go here. So Terraform provider ALZ, which is us. But there's also this thing called ALZ lib, and that's in its own repository. The reason for that is some of the logic is not specific to the provider. And actually, if we ever wanted to do this in, I don't know, Pulumi, or if we ever wanted to write any other tools, then this library then becomes an easy way for us to do that and interrogate the library and do stuff with it. So yeah, that's the kind of construction of the provider and a little bit of a dive into its internals. So let's have a look at this. This is the module. So you might have seen this before, but some of the examples I want to show you. I've got a local lib directory in here with an archetype override file. So this is new. This has just been released in the last week or so. So here I'm saying, look, I'm going to have an archetype called landing zone override. I'm going to base it on landing zones, which isn't even part of this lib directory, but it's part of the ALZ reference one. So as long as it exists, it's somewhere, it's fine. You can override it. And I'm going to remove these two policy assignments. That's what I'm going to do there. That's just how you do it. You can also do policy assignments to add, policy definitions to add, remove, all that kind of stuff you do here. So yeah, I've got two. I've got landing zones and platform that I've created overrides for. And if I look in my module, when I declare this, if I look at my landing zones one, I've just changed that base archetype to landing zone override now, which is referenced here, landing zone override. Okay, so you can kind of string it together like that. So it's based on the ALZ one. It's just got these changes in which I want. Actually, the reason behind these changes is because I talked about those well-known policy parameters earlier. They are still injecting old policy parameter values into these policies, which have now been updated to work with AMA, and those parameters don't exist anymore. So the reason I've removed them is because if you try and deploy it, the processing fails essentially, and it doesn't work. So that's the reason I've done it, but I thought it was an excellent way of demoing this capability. The other thing is we've got this new policy assignments to modify thing in here, and we now support all the advanced policy stuff like resource selectors and overrides and things like that. So you can specify policy assignments to modify. You can specify the name of the policy assignment, which this one's in the root archetype, as you can see here. I'm giving it a name, and then I've got selectors and in, right? And when I run a plan, what happens is it says, okay, I'm going to replace this policy assignment, and I'm going to add the resource selector to that. You can see it's all done for you. Okay, actually forces the replacement. That's down to the Azure RM provider, not me, but that's kind of how it works. But you can see we've got all this stuff in here. Hopefully all the tooltips and stuff work as well. So if I go like in here, I can press like that and it tells me all the things I can do. So it reads the schema from the variable and stuff like that. So yeah, I can override the identity. If I wanted to put that as user assigned, I can do that there as well. So yeah, all the stuff you can modify in policy assignments is now baked into there. We'd love you to try it out and let us know what you think. I am conscious of time. I could go on, but I'm not going to. So yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and I will hand back to Jack.
Thank you, Matt, and lots of good chat in the chat about this and migration guidance. So yeah, well worth you casting your eyes over that. But we definitely want to hear from people if they've got ideas and what they want. I know it's a hot topic still in debate whether we do or don't provide tooling and what we do. So yeah, look out for those things. There's also a good question about enterprise scale CAF that's just come in, so it might be worth you having a look at that one as well. So we've pulled it back. We're pretty much on time, so I'll try to keep to that. There's been lots of really good discussions in the chat, and we'll continue to answer the current questions that are still there. Just as a heads up to the next call, so the next one will be on the 12th of June, which is a Wednesday, and it will be back to an APAC friendly time zone. So it'll be early in the morning for those of you in the UK, and very early in the morning for those of you in America, or maybe even late one evening. But it will be for our friends over in Australia and surrounding countries. So again, it'll be available on a recording at the link that's shared here, and I've shared a couple of times in the chat. Please do sign up, and if you want to talk about anything specific, then please leave a comment on the GitHub issue there, the 1596. We always want to hear and make sure these calls are relevant for you and you're getting the value out of them, because they are for you, even though we do an awful lot of the talking. But that's the way to influence the agenda, is leave us a comment there, even up to the day before. We check it right up until the minute before, so please do feel free to leave comments on those. And with that, I think it's just a thank you to all of the presenters today, a really good number of presenters, and great to see so many people getting involved. We look forward to seeing you again next time. And as always, please come and leave us GitHub issues. We do really pay attention to those and are very active. So if you've got questions and you want to get in touch in the meantime, please do use those forums to get in touch, hold of us. But with that, wish you a great rest of the day, whether it's the start or the end of your day, and we'll catch you next time.